Hi everyone, I'm Julia with the Berkeley Judicial Institute, back with another installment of Judges in the Community. Today, we're joined by Judge Harner and Dr. Wiggins to share their inspiring work in creating a high school law day in conjunction with regional moot courts for law students. Good afternoon, Judge Harner and Dr. Wiggins. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to be here. I can't wait to dive into your journey and insights. But just to start out, maybe starting with Judge Harner, would you mind briefly sharing a little bit more about who you are, where you sit, and your personal judicial history?
Of course. So thank you, Julia, for having us. I think we're both excited and honored to be here. As you said, my name is Michelle Harner. I sit in the United States Bankruptcy Court for the District of Maryland. I took the bench in 2017, so I'm approaching my 8th-year anniversary, which is hard for me to believe. It doesn't seem like it's been that long, but I've loved every minute of it. Prior to taking the bench, I was first in private practice with Jones Day, right at the end of my practice career in their Chicago office, and then transitioned to teaching. So I started as an associate professor of law at the University of Nebraska in Lincoln, and then was moved over to the University of Maryland, Francis King Carey School of Law. And I was there until I took the bench and loved teaching. So one thing we'll talk about today, both Dr. Wiggins and I think really love teaching and are passionate about education. So this project was a combination of our love of education, our love of the law.
So, good afternoon, Julia. Thanks again for inviting us to participate in this. We're really excited to tell people what we've about our project. Um, I've I'm in the director of the research division here at the FJC, Federal Judicial Center, and I've been at the Federal Judicial Center since over 30 years. Let's just put it at that. And I love it here. And part of the reason I like it is to participate in projects like the one we're going to talk about today.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for your introductions. It is such an honor to speak with you both. So now diving straight into the core of our conversation today, what project are you here to share with us and where did it all begin?
As you mentioned, we're here to talk about a high school law day that Dr. Wiggins and I created as an add-on to something that was already established. So Dr. Wiggins, working with one of our good friends and a former colleague of Dr. Wiggins, Denise Neary, have helped the American Bankruptcy Institute and the American College of Bankruptcy put on a moot court competition for law school students. And they do it every year in February on President's Day in conjunction with the American Bankruptcy Institute's Duberstein competition, which is a national moot court competition for law students based on a bankruptcy moot court problem. And the add-on that we created and experimented with this year was called a high school law day, and it brought together area high school students, all from high school mock trial teams, and their coaches and the team members came to DC, and we integrated them into the moot court competition schedule. So our objective was to introduce them to the law, to the moot court competition, and into bankruptcy law in particular. And the way the day was designed, Julia, just so people have some context for what Dr. Wiggins and I will be talking about, is we went through a whole selection process, which we can talk about. But when they got to DC, we started the day together as a group. And Dr. Wiggins and I and a host of volunteer, what I'll call faculty members, practitioners, and law students and law clerks from the region came together, and we spoke to the law students first about bankruptcy law, about the profession, and got to know them a little bit. We also introduced them to the bankruptcy moot court problem, which they had some background on because two of my fantastic colleagues, Judge Haig and Judge Gregg, did a pre-event video that explained the fact pattern to the high school students so they could understand what they'd be seeing. And we reviewed that with them in our first moments together during the actual high school law day. They then wrote down on note cards for us questions they would ask the law students if they were the judges, and also made kind of an issues checklist, things they would be listening for during the arguments themselves. We were looking for ways, I'll be honest, right, to keep the high school students engaged, remembering what it was like to be 16, 17, 18 years old and have terms thrown out to you that aren't very familiar and people you don't really know, trying to innovate ways to keep them engaged. And so we collected all of that and we passed out the note cards to the judges who were actually judging the moot court competition. And so the next thing we did with the students is we had them observe one of the arguments and we had them listen for the issues and we had them listen to see if the judges used their question. And during the first time they watched the moot court competition, only one of the students' questions was actually used, but she was ecstatic. And I think it got people excited to try to really rethink the questions they wanted to ask. So after that, we had a lunch with everybody, including the law students and the judges and the practitioners from the bankruptcy community that were there for the moot court competition. And after lunch, we went back and we explored the courthouse a little bit. We got to see Judge Gunn's chambers and give students an insight into what chambers look like and how it feels. And then we also had them write down another question. What question would you ask this time in the moot court competition? And one of the judges who was judging both rounds actually commented to me the growth in the students from that first set of questions to the second was pretty amazing. The other wonderful thing we got to do with the students during that space before the final argument was Judge Goldblatt from the Bankruptcy Court in Delaware came in and spoke to them. We wanted them to hear from as many professionals as they could, and he was very gracious with his time, as were many members of Dr. Wiggins' staff from the FJC came in and talked to the students about what you do with an interest in the law that's not being a practitioner, which I think was very insightful to some of the students. We then watched the final round of the moot. Students again listening to their questions. I think now we had 4 or 5 questions used in that final round, so they were very excited. And they got to watch the awards. They got to talk some more with those attending the moot court competition. And perhaps the highlight of the day was some takeaways that they got from the competition and from Dr. Wiggins, including a little scale of justice lapel pin that they were all wearing very proudly at the end of the day. So that's kind of a high level overview of what the day itself looked like. And Dr. Wiggins, I don't know if I missed anything. It was a blur. It went so quickly that day.
Yeah. Well, I think you touched on everything. I think 2 things that you mentioned I would highlight, and that is the preparation of the students ahead of time. In addition to the video about the problem itself, Judge Harner actually prepared a bankruptcy basics video for them. And so not only did they know about the problem, but they kind of got an overview of bankruptcy too. And so they came in sort of ready to learn more. And the other word she used was integration. And I think one of the things that really struck me is at the beginning of the day, we had separate sign-in places, one for the high school students and one for the law students, because they had very different things going on that day. But by lunch, people were mingling. And I think the high school students were very free and felt comfortable approaching the law students. And the law students, too, were interested in why they were there and talked with them. So it was really a nice day for that.
Yeah, and I'm also curious how this program has evolved over time, maybe in the planning stages as well. Has there been any roadblocks or inspirations along the way? Please tell us more about how the high school law day has grown to what it is today.
I want to just say one thing before Judge Harner says. I will say that it was about this time on a afternoon at work, and I was busily trying to finish my work, and I got an email from Judge Harner. And I said, that is really interesting. So I started Googling and we just started planning away. So I think the how it got started was just somebody sending an email, having an idea, sending an email to somebody who was equally excited and just taking it from there.
Dr. Wiggins, I think that's a great way to step into this next question from Julia, because I think part of the reason it was successful is we had great people working on this project with us. And as Dr. Wiggins says, she was my initial recipient of my email with this crazy idea to try something new and different with the moot court competition, because I knew she feels the same way I do about education and the law, and love working with her, quite honestly. And we always seem to have a good time while doing something good, or at least we hope is good. So the way it started was just very organically like that. Hey, we've been doing this moot court competition with the law schools so successfully for so long. It felt like it was time to try something new and something different, that the core of the program was so solid, it could withstand an experiment, even if the experiment failed. And so I think that's the first thing I would highlight, is we were adding it on to something that was well established. So it gave us some flexibility and freedom to experiment and try things that were a little different. And then I will say, once we thought, oh, this is going to be great, let's bring all these high school students to DC and get them in the beautiful courthouse there that they open up for us, and let them experience the law and the people involved in the law in our region. We had kind of stars in our eyes. We thought this would be a huge group. We could get 30 kids there. It would be fantastic. And our friend and colleague, Denise Neary, who's always kind of the realist in the group, said, okay, let's take this slow. Let's think about this, and let's do it in baby steps. And that was, I think, hugely important advice, because it allowed us to scale the project to a very manageable size. And so, being the first time, we wanted to make sure we were establishing a platform for success that could be built on, so that hopefully, Julia, 10 years from now, we might be talking and there might be 10 of these around the country, linked on to other law school moot court competitions. And so, once we realized that we could do this, that we had support from not only the three people that we've mentioned so far, but from the organizations that host the moot court competition. We had buy-in from everyone. The challenge was finding the students, right? It sounds terrific to say, oh, let's just bring a bunch of high school students to DC and let them just absorb what the law is in one of the best places there is to do that. And then thinking about logistics, and how do you identify those students? And how do you start to think about a good way to vet applications and identify students who will be engaged in the day and not just taking advantage of a trip to DC for the day? And how do you coordinate with schools? And how do you think about potential liability? Do we need waivers, right? Once you start digging into a project, particularly when it's a new startup project, you start to identify issues that weren't readily apparent when it sounded like a really good idea. But fortunately, we had great support. And, I'll let Dr. Wiggins maybe talk a little bit about how we reached out to different entities to find students to come to this law day, because we didn't necessarily just want to, post an announcement somewhere without any structure or process.
So I think it's really important to work with existing institutions who are working in the schools, either maybe through the school itself, but if there's a group that's also sort of an overseeing group. One of the things that we learned a couple of things. Judge Harner mentioned we had an application process, and I thought that was very important. And we basically got information about the students, sort of what year in high school they were, as well as they wrote a small essay of why they were interested. And I will say the essays varied in their depth, and sort of, you could tell some people spent more time than others, but they shared one thing, and that was sort of a love for sort of what law is, and they wanted to learn more. And but it did provide a good basis for sort of looking at the candidates. We were very fortunate that we did not get more applicants than we had room for, because I think it would be very hard to distinguish them. In working with the schools, a couple of things I would say from our experience, in addition to what Judge Harner said, I think it's really important for a teacher at the schools to be engaged with the program and to accompany the students because they actually provide a lot of background in addition to what we can provide in the setting for the students' understanding. And we've sort of established sort of longer term relationships with some of these teachers that I think will serve us well in the coming years in terms of identifying students. So those were the couple of things I would add.
I think that's terrific. And Julie, if I could just add on to what Dr. Wiggins just said, because I think it goes to something you were referencing in this question, the biggest challenges, I think I would agree with Dr. Wiggins, kind of identifying the students and making those relationships from scratch was a challenge. And I will say we were fortunate because one of the first things Dr. Wiggins and I did after we decided we were going to do this is we started looking for organizations that worked with high school students in our area. And I think most areas, although I haven't looked, so I shouldn't, make that statement, but at least in our region, the Maryland State Bar Association has an organization called My Law that focuses on educating high school students. I think they even do some middle school student work as well. And so we reached out to this organization and said, we have this opportunity. Can you help us identify good schools for this kind of inaugural try at it? And Shelley Brown, I have to give Shelley Brown a huge shout out at My Law. She said, absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that struck me in this project. Everyone we talked to was like, I am in, let's do this, from first Dr. Wiggins and then Shelley Brown to every one of the practitioners and judges we asked to come speak to the law schools or the high school students. They were all in, and that made a huge difference. But I think if you can identify an organization in your area that already has relationships with the high schools, it makes it so much easier because Shelley was able to tell us, I think these are great schools. I think you'll get responses. Because the other thing I will say is, although we had this idea and we started planning it pretty early on, we weren't able to bring it all together till probably, I want to say October or November was when we were ready to reach out to schools, which meant students were going to have a very compressed time frame to get their applications in, to have the essays submitted, and then to get cleared to participate in the courthouse experience in February. So hopefully, now that we've done it once, we'll have a more reasonable and manageable timeline that will enable more schools to get their students engaged and on board. But I'm not sure we would have gotten this over the finish line without the support of the organization that Shelley and My Law brought to us.
I mean, I will say if there's not such an organization in your area, it might help to just Google the high schools because that's what I did. And I did find a number of high schools have like law clubs or various kinds of programs. And so you could work with a specific high school. But I did think Shelley was very helpful in saying, work with this school or this school or this school. And so it really made it easy at the end. And I think she will help. She knows the schools and she knows how they work with outside organizations. And so that was very helpful.
Right. And I think it also enabled us to open up the opportunity to more schools all at once because we didn't have those relationships. And Shelley, I think, was able to put the announcement out there and then, kind of give us some feedback on who was being responsive and who thought they could meet the deadlines.
Yeah, that's amazing. And when you reflect on the experience of these high school students and law students that you had just mentioned, are there any stories or moments in particular that stand out to you or you want to highlight that kind of speak to the impact that you've been able to make on your communities and also just in the school settings?
For me, there were two schools represented at the Law Day. And what really touched me a lot was both schools reached out to us afterwards. One school, I think, sent us a token of appreciation in a tote bag, which I carry to the gym now. And the other kept in regular communications about their moot court team, their high school moot court team, and how they were doing. And I think it was just seeing how much it affected them and how much they appreciated it. It really made me excited to do it again. And next year, expand it a little bit.
So I would agree with that. I think the feedback from the high school students was really amazing. I also will say that just the growth throughout the day, you could tell when we started with them, they had done their homework, they had read the problem, they had watched the videos, and their questions were what you would expect, just kind of very basic. When we got back together after lunch, after they had watched one of the moot court competitions, just the energy and excitement in their questions from things they noticed or ideas they hadn't thought about, or asking, well, why would she raise this issue? It was also interesting because all the students we had, and this maybe is another good tip if you're thinking of doing some kind of high school add-on to a moot court competition, as Dr. Wiggins says, they were all members of mock trial teams. So they were used to competing in kind of a courtroom setting, be it, albeit a little bit different. But, they were making observations. Well, the counsel for, the appellant in this particular argument, she wasn't coming off as confident, and you could see the judges, watching her very closely to see her presentation. And it showed me I really need to be, firm in my posture at the podium and confident in my responses, and forthcoming when I need more time to find an answer to a question. And just their observations were mind-blowing. If I had only been that insightful as a high school student,
And when they had a chance to talk with the judges, I remember one of the questions that struck me is I think it was a young woman said, what makes an advocate stand out to you? What makes them better? And I really liked that question because she really wanted to know from the judges, what is it you're looking for? And again, very insightful.
And I think on the flip side of that, Julie, I think the law school students, we were very mindful not to interrupt their day, because it's a very important training experience for the law school students to get to the national Duberstein competition. And that was one reason we didn't observe the first round of the moot court arguments. We gave the law students their space, let them get comfortable. But, as Dr. Wiggins said, during lunch, they were mixing, and I think it was almost a nice relief for the law students. It was a nice distraction from kind of the stress of the competition itself, to have these high school students there, and the high school students were looking up to them. I mean, how cool is that? These law students were kind of role models now for these young, up and coming moot court competitors to be. And so I think it just gave a more relaxed feel to the day. And I think everyone was impressed with the high school students. And it was just nice to see engagement at so many different levels of experience, and just bringing different perspectives to what we were doing as a community. I felt everyone maybe grew a little bit more that day.
Yeah, and kind of now shifting the spotlight onto you two both, with these interactions with the law students and high school students and collaborations with various individuals and in preparing this program, I would love to hear a little bit more about the personal impact your involvement has had on you as both a professional in your respective fields and also as an individual in your personal life.
So I'll go first here, and then let Dr. Wiggins have the last word. For me, I love working with students, but really anyone who wants to know more about the law. I think the more we help people understand our legal system and the judiciary, the better we are as a community, because people will better understand the process and be able to pursue their rights more effectively in the process should they ever need it. So I welcome any opportunity to talk about what we do in our profession, and have had, the honor of being on various sides, practitioner, teacher, and now judge. And so I love paying it forward, for lack of a better word, in that sense. And really, I like to start conversations, and I hope, from that law day, conversations went back to the high schools and they were talking about it with their peers, and they were getting other people excited about maybe doing it next year when maybe it's a little bit bigger and we have more slots. And I hope that, it got the law students thinking about how they can do something maybe in their communities with their high schools where they graduated from, or their undergrad schools. And for, the practitioners who took time out of their busy schedules, the judges and practitioners who gave up a federal holiday, right, to come and sit in court, what they do every day. I hope it was rewarding and encourages them to do it more. So it was just hugely impactful, and I'm so grateful to everyone who got on board and helped us pull it off.
So just to, if I have the final word, I will say that I started my career thinking I was going to be in academia. I started off as a professor in a psychology department, and I loved it. I loved the mentoring. I loved the teaching. And then I quickly came to the Federal Judicial Center, and opportunities like this sort of really bring me alive. I love working with students, and as much as I love my job at the FJC, one part I miss is working with students and being a mentor. And I've been fortunate over the years to have students come through the research division. I've worked with them, but this is just another opportunity to do what I love best.
That's amazing. And for the last question, for those who are interested in doing the amazing work that you both do, I would love to know what it takes for you to prepare this kind of program and any expert tricks for those aspiring to get involved in such work.
So I would say reach out to us. We are happy to share everything we did. We're happy to learn from you if you've done something like this or have thought about doing something like this in your community, hearing, what innovations you've been contemplating. But, I think if you have an idea and it's something that will engage people around you, you'd be surprised how willing people are to jump in and help. And certainly we would be in that bucket. I mean, I'll speak for Dr. Wiggins.
Yes, I agree.
You could call us. We'll share all our materials. Happy to share our contacts to the extent that would help. But I think this would be a great addition to any standing moot court competition, because again, it just gives younger people an opportunity to watch their peers who are a little older doing what they hope to do one day. And I think everyone grows in that experience.
I think you said it.
Well, thank you both so much for sharing your stories and experiences. I'm sure many of those tuning in on this interview are as inspired and ready to start their law day as, as members of the judiciary, and just also members of wanting to share the passion and depth of what the legal field can provide to both students and the community. And so thank you for sharing your lovely comments, and also opening up the discussion to more of those in the community. And with that, as a member of the Berkeley Judicial Institute, I want to thank you both, Judge Harner and Dr. Wiggins, so much for your amazing insights into your involvement with law students and, supporting the community. So thank you.